Welcome and welcome back to Never Again Is Now, a podcast about anti-Semitism. I'm Evelyn Marcus.
And I am Phyllis Sembler-Miller.
The massacre at the Tree of Life synagogue in Pittsburgh in 2018 was a shock and a massive wake-up call to American Jews. Within days of the massacres, a Pittsburgh resident came up with the idea of a summit to address this hate. Today, we will be talking with the co-founder of this summit, whose third conference is this month in Pittsburgh, along with the president of the summit's nonprofit corporation. Laura Ellsworth is the co-founder of the Eradicate Hate Global Summit, the co-chair of its board of directors, and the principal planner for the conference's programs, speakers, and working groups. In addition, she is the partner in charge of global community service initiatives for the Jones Day law firm. Charles Moellenberg, a lawyer who retired after 41 years at Jones Day law firm, is the president of the nonprofit corporation for the Eradicate Hate Summit.org. Laura and Chuck, we are very pleased to have you with us to talk about this response to the Tree of Life synagogue massacre.
Yes, and though we wish we didn't have to have you on because it hadn't happened, since it has happened, we want to talk about your amazing response so that we know that the conference came out of the massacre in 2018. But what did you immediately envision for the response, and with whom did you co-found this project? Questions for you, Laura.
Sure. Thank you so much for having us on. The project was founded, as you said, literally as we were standing and watching the massacre in real time. And we knew that people we loved were being impacted right there in front of our eyes. And the conviction became so strong that those people who were being hurt and were being killed will not have died for this and will not have died for him. And so the summit was born based on the resolve that we would convert the tragedy that happened to us and the loss that happened here into the most significant and powerful force in the world to bring together the experts of the world in actionable solutions to combat hate in all of its forms. And that's how the summit was born.
So the third one is this month. And how did you go from idea to actual summit?
So the first thing I did was pick up the phone to my co-founder, Mark Nordenberg. Mark was, at the time, the Chancellor Emeritus of the University of Pittsburgh and somebody who in this community had had a hand in every significant community thing over the 40 years that I've lived here. And together, we reached out to other members of the community and then gradually reached out to other members of the field around the world to conceive of, design, and execute the summit, which, you know, I grew up in New York City and I'm a Pittsburgh transplant, but I will tell you I am a Pittsburgh convert because there is no place like this community of people who will reach across divides to find solutions to problems. It is an extraordinary community, and I think the summit is a real testament to the kind of people who make up Pittsburgh.
Well, I only feel badly that I didn't know about it until by accident a few weeks ago, someone we were going to hope to interview said, "Oh, I can't do it that week. I'm going to be at the Eradicate Hate Summit." And I said, "What's that?" And then I got so excited when I learned about it. So I'm really glad that we're having the opportunity to share this. And now Evelyn has a question.
Chuck, can you tell us about the summit's partnership with the United Nations to develop the game plan? And can you tell us what the game plan is?
The game plan, I would say, is a great example of how the summit can reach out around the world to make a difference. The game plan is a partnership between the United Nations and the summit, as you said. It happened when the United Nations Special Advisor on Genocide attended the very first summit back in 2021. Her name is Alice Enderitu. The special advisor was so excited by what she saw at the conference that she stayed all 3 days. She hadn't planned to. She stayed all 3 days, then went back to the United Nations, spoke with the Secretary General, and proposed a partnership between the United Nations and the summit. The partnership was to further the United Nations mission to counter hate speech around the world. The game plan draws on sports. Why sports? Because the typical perpetrator of these sorts of hate crimes are men. They tend to be in the mid-teens to mid-20s. They are attracted to sports. So the game plan aims to bring together all of the professional sports leagues and teams around the world to develop a common message against hate, to develop positive messages that sports fans around the world will hear and hopefully take to heart. So far in the United States, we have just about every professional sports league, from the NBA, the NFL, Major League Baseball, the women's national team in soccer, NASCAR. One of the participants in this partnership is the Fenway Sports Group, which recently purchased the Pittsburgh Penguins. The Fenway Sports Group also owns Liverpool Football Club. So in April, the Liverpool Football Club invited all the English Premier League teams to come to Liverpool for a meeting, along with cricket, rugby, horse racing, Formula One racing. All of this made perfect sense for the summit to participate in, because one of our board members, Michelle Rosenthal, who lost 2 of her brothers in the Tree of Life massacre, is the former head of community affairs for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Michelle knows many people, not only in the NFL, but in the sports world. And with her guidance, her help, and many, many others, this has now turned into a worldwide collaboration to counter hate. Our goal is to, by 2026, have the game plan developed with a message that can be used during the World Cup that will take place, the Men's World Cup will take place in the United States, Canada, and Mexico.
Which sport?
That is soccer.
Okay.
So they would say football over in England and most of the other countries.
Right. So what is it that the United Nations officials saw at your first conference that impressed her so much?
It was the way that the summit was able to bring together people from around the world who were the leading experts in the anti-hate field. Many of these experts would go to their own conferences. Psychologists would go to conferences on psychology. Law enforcement would go to their separate conference. The idea of the summit was to break down all of those silos and put together a multidisciplinary collaboration to develop best practices in the anti-hate field. And she not only saw that happening, but she, I believe, would say that she was motivated by the survivors of these, vicious hate crimes who attended the conference and the families of the victims. Their experiences how they talk about their experiences and what we can learn from their experiences is truly as inspiring and motivational as it is chilling and disturbing to hear.
So the idea is that the people who could develop into perpetrators are many times interested in sports, and you activated the sports. The game plan activates the sports world to bring out a message. Is that correct? Is that a good summary of what the game plan?
I think that's a very good summary, Evelyn. And then the idea is to have a number of the famous athletes also convey this message, whether it's in soccer or football or, as we would say here, football or rugby, or whatever it may be. We also want to get the leading athletes to convey the message.
Sorry, Laura, you wanted to say something, I think.
No, I'm sorry to have interrupted. I think I just wanted to emphasize the point that Chuck raised, which is, I think that the special advisor was profoundly moved by the survivors and family members she met here. It's one of the things that has become a signature of the summit. And we didn't bring people here just to talk about how they had been victims, because remember, the summit is about taking victimhood and converting it into forward movement in the fight against hate. And that's what she saw all of these family members doing. It's what she watched Michelle Rosenthal doing. And she really wanted to support that. And when she went back and talked to the Security Council, that's what she said. She said, the summit is real people doing real things in the real world for actual people who they lost. And so that is such a unique thing in her experience to see something of this scale that had been founded in that way. As she said, and rightly so, there isn't anything like it in the world. And it was that power. And we saw it again when we did the presentation at the United Nations. It's the whole chamber of the United Nations, right? The president, the secretary, the whole thing. And during some of the official talks in the beginning, there was some squirming and some checking phones and so forth. But the moment that Michelle, who was one of our speakers, began to talk, the room froze. You could have heard a pin drop. And it was so powerful. And another speaker there was Raymond Whitfield, whose mother had been killed at the Top supermarket in Buffalo. And when he spoke, you could have heard a pin drop. And I cannot tell you how many of these, very prestigious diplomats came up at the end of the presentation and said they have never seen anything like it. And the power of those words mattered so much. And so, that is a huge part of what the summit does. And we hear it not just from sports leaders, but we hear it from the experts who come too, because one of the things about this field is it's very difficult to work in as a professional. The things you see, the things you hear, it is the worst of humanity. You have to deal with that day in and day out. And many times you sort of suppress how you feel about that. And when we had people come here and meet these amazing, strong survivors who were bringing their own ideas to the table, it reminded them why they do what they do. And it's an important point I wanted to mention.
Yep. Yeah, I can imagine it's very powerful to, hear survivors talk about what happened and how they want to move forward in combating hate. And taking action. Could you, Laura, give us a feel for who has attended? You already mentioned some leagues and Liverpool, but who attended and what action programs have come out of the first two summits?
Well, on the sports working group, it is one of 25 working groups that we have developed within the summit. And the summit was originally designed to provide forward motion, not just come, talk, and go back to your desk. And it's a 5-part structure. Number one, the top people in the world for real. They're all here. Number two, together in person in Pittsburgh. We've already talked about why we think Pittsburgh matters. In person matters. We love podcasts. We love you for doing that. But, you know, in person matters, and some of the most creative things happen. And also we believe that things happen because of relationships between human beings, not organizations making statements about each other. If we can build those relationships of trust and commitment, that's an important part of the summit. The third part is focusing all the conversations around deliverables, something that exists now, that doesn't exist now, but should and would improve the field. The fourth piece is creating working groups to achieve that deliverable. And the fifth piece is a summit, the next summit a year from now. So you have a 1 year deadline to be on your feet explaining how you're doing. So these working groups are by and large just forming up. The sports working group has been in progress the longest. Several others have been in progress for about a year. The others are forming up this year and will work between this year and next year's summit. But the working groups is where the true forward motion, we hope, is going to happen. And it is our hope and dream that it will be as impactful as the sports working group has been so far.
Yeah, I think that message for 2025 at the soccer World Cup is, I guess, one deliverable. Have there been other deliverables defined yet?
Other deliverables not related to the sports working group might be one that I would describe this way. So one of the things about the summit is that we look at every sector and talk about what every sector can contribute to this cause. And that includes tech and medicine and law and civil society and government and on and on and on. And so one of the strategies that people use in other fields is see something, say something, right? In classic terrorism, see something, say something. Well, in this world, often people didn't know what they were seeing. After all of these mass killings, you know, we read about people who saw something, but they didn't know what they were seeing. And they didn't know how to say something if they had seen something. And so we have a number of working groups that are trying to solve that. One of those is called the Youth Red Flags. It is developing a manual that can be shared with people in schools and in communities and so forth to understand if you're seeing somebody who is walking down this dark path. And as Chuck says, we know this personality. We know they are tremendous commonalities among all of these perpetrators. And so this puts those in understandable terms. A second piece of it is what's called the directory. Who do you call? If I'm a mom, am I going to call law enforcement on my child? No, I need to know a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a coach. And so this directory, which we're doing in partnership with the McCain Institute, it's a geocoded directory of the experts in your area. So if you're in Des Moines and you want to see who to call, it's in there, whether it's law enforcement or counselors or whoever it may be. And that whole process of see something, say something is part of what we're building. Another working group is in mental health, because many mental health professionals are seeing these individuals right now, but they don't really know what they're seeing or how to deal with them. And so we have experts from the top people in the world, from Harvard, from the University of Chicago, different places, who are putting together an actual training deck for continuing education for psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers. And then we're going to be working with the accrediting organizations, starting in the US, of the states, to get that continuing legal education topic on the agenda, and ideally maybe on a mandatory for a year or two, like suicide is mandatory, right, for practitioners. We're going to see if we can get this as one of the mandatory ones because it's such an unknown area. So I think that's an example of how working groups are designed to provide some solutions.
That sounds amazing.
I just wanted to say that I looked very closely at all the working groups. And not only was I amazed at the variety, but since I'm going to be joining the Upstanders in Action one, I looked at all the people and just I don't want to say brain power, the creativity, the different pieces from different parts of, I don't know what the word is, knowledge base is just incredible. And in case Laura didn't make it clear, it's not that the working groups they're going to meet in person at the conference, but then they're expected to work. And this is all volunteer. They're expected to work throughout the year, not just to say it was a very nice conference, see you next year, but whatever comes out of it to actually see if you can put it in place. Anyway, Chuck, I'm going to ask you the next question. As president of this nonprofit, what are your specific responsibilities?
Well, that's a good question.
He's the boss.
Sometimes I feel like we're making it up as we go. The theme overall is sustainability. The first two conferences were very successful. And it was a new enterprise, obviously, in 2021. We didn't know how it was going to go. It caught on. 2022 was bigger and better in terms of the number of people who came and spoke, as well as the number of people who attended. And it was time to form a legal structure to take us into the future. So as you mentioned earlier, a nonprofit corporation was formed beginning of this year. I was asked to be the president. My background is in law, but it's litigation, not corporation. So I'm finding out everything that goes into forming a nonprofit corporation, and it varies. I report to the board. So if the board thinks we should have a policy on communications or a policy on diversity, then it's my responsibility to get that done. I will either write the policy myself or work with our outside legal counsel to come up with the policy. If Laura goes into a meeting with our funders and is able to convince a foundation to give us a grant, well, then you have to go through the whole process. There's a grant application. There will be grant reports. There's figuring out the payment method, everything that goes along with implementing that grant, the thank you letters. I will do that. To put on the conference, we need insurance. So I've been working with the insurance brokers to come up with the insurance policies that we need. Another thing I do is work with our consultants. We are an all-volunteer organization. We have no paid employees, but there are times when we need the expertise of professionals in the field, like accounting, law, grant management, fundraising. I supervise all of them initially to make sure that we're all on the same page. We're getting the job done. And then they're just the basics. We're a nonprofit corporation, but to go out and raise money, we need a determination letter from the Internal Revenue Service to accredit us. So I found out about that and worked with our legal counsel to accomplish that. If you want to fundraise in states, you have to register in those states. I have never filled out more forms in my life than as president of this corporation. So it's a little bit of everything. And I have to say, I have so much respect and appreciation now for the small business owners out there who have to go through all of these steps when they're starting up their own businesses. It's essential. It's not easy, but it's what allows us to do the work that we want to do.
Right. And I just wanted to add one thing I realized that we haven't made really plain. This is an interfaith summit. This is not a Jewish summit. And I think it's really important that we emphasize that Eradicate Hate is not just against Jews, it's against anyone that's targeted. And that's what I think is so amazing about this summit is when you've talked about people from all different spheres of life and places on the globe, but let's make it really clear we're not just talking about Jews.
Right, absolutely. And we have this year among the survivors who are coming, we have survivors of the attack at Christchurch in New Zealand upon Muslims, 51 Muslims killed at prayer. We have a section on LGBTQ individuals. Women are targeted by the incel movement and killed. I mentioned the top supermarket, El Paso, where Latinos and immigrants were targeted. So it is Oak Creek, where Sikhs were targeted. And it's an unending litany of people who are targeted because of who they are, who they were born as. And one of the reasons it's important that we do that is because every single one of us is the other to somebody. Every single one of us. And anybody who thinks this is, a problem of the Jews or the, anybody else, right? You're going to be next, because this is fundamentally born from certain cultural factors that are coming to a boil in our community around the world, that are manifesting themselves in overt violence against somebody who they think is the other. And it's just critically important. And I think it helps every single group or every single human being to understand it impacts all of us.
Laura, is there a particular action plan that you hope to come out of this year's summit?
I hope that we will have a list of at least 25 deliverables, one important, significant, meaningful deliverable that comes out of every working group. And that at the summit next year, we can cross at least some of those off the list. The ones that are harder and more long-term, I hope we can cross a lot off the to-do list. But until unfortunately, we built the summit to last long after we're all gone. And unfortunately, I think it may be here for a while. But what we want to see is action, measurable change, actually making a difference in the field of prevention. That's really what we're focused on.
Yes, and I think unfortunately it will have to be forever and ever because of humanity's inclination to go to the dark sides. So we need vigilance all the time to help us go to the light side. So Chuck, what are your plans though for transforming this into from an all-volunteer to having the next level, having a professional staff?
Yeah, we realize that again, to be sustainable over the long term, we need to have a professional staff in place. We hope to accomplish that by 2026. That gives us a couple years to fundraise, because ultimately everything we do depends on funding. It's the world we live in. So we hope to transform the recognition that we are achieving around the world into a broader, expanded funding base that will allow us to hire a president to take my place, to hire full-time program managers, which will make Laura's life so much easier than trying to plan a conference like she's been doing virtually single-handedly, to bring in a professional fundraiser on a continuing basis that, again, can connect us with the foundations, corporations, individuals who all would like to support us in accomplishing our goals. I mean, we realize that we can't eradicate hate, as you have said, but we do believe that we can reduce the violence. And that's where we hope to show results over the next few years, still in my lifetime, I hope.
Laura, how can our listeners attend the conference, which is from September 27 to September 29 in Pittsburgh?
So the best thing you can do is come. The humanity that happens at the summit is something not to be missed. And the connections that you can make with the people in the hallways, in between the programming, that's the real power of this place. So we have a website, eradicatehatesummit.org. You can go on there and register to join us in person. If you can't get to Pittsburgh, we live stream our plenary sessions. Unfortunately, we can't live stream the working groups, but we live stream the plenary sessions. And the one thing I've heard so many people say, particularly people who were victims and who come to us shortly after their loss, and they say, I was so lost. I was so demoralized and fearful and just lost at what could have happened in our community. That's exactly how we felt when the Tree of Life happened here. But what we have found is that through learning and understanding and the issues that are brought to the fore by the summit, you will find hope. You will find that you can be a part of this solution in your community, in your profession, in your zone of influence, in your high school, in your grade school, right? You can have a role to play if you understand these issues. It is not hopeless, and it is not beyond any one of us to be a part of the solution. So I hope that people do come and experience it and watch it and find their part of the solution, because we all hold one.
We will include eradicatehatesummit.org in the description of the program. And if you, those were wonderful last words, but if there's anything else that you'd like to add, please do. Chuck?
I can only echo what Laura said. I'm doing what I'm doing today for the summit because I attended the first conference. There were so many amazing people, amazing because they spend their lives dedicated to trying to find a way to reduce hate and prevent the violence. It is truly inspiring to come to the conference. And if you come, I think you will walk out of there like me, thinking that I need to be a part of this.
And I think the only other thing I would say is that if any of your listeners are exhausted by polarization, exhausted by just all the bad things they see and hear when they turn on the news, come to us, come to the summit, because we are people who are about respectful listening, about constructive change, about caring more about what gets done than what gets said. That's what the summit is. And if you feel like you need that in your life on this most critical of issues in our lifetime, come here and be a part of what we're building here.
Yes, very well said. And I mean, it's amazing what you did instead of just issuing news releases after the event. I mean, what you created is, and the "your" is plural in English, as we know. All of you created. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And for coming on the show, and thank our listeners for listening. Those of you who want to know more about Evelyn and me and our activities, you can go to the YouTube, Never Again Is Now podcast channel on YouTube. And as we end every show, we say, please, without putting yourself in physical harm, speak up against anti-Semitism and all hate.